The knock came just as the sun slipped behind the Montana hills, the kind of knock that made Catherine Whitmore's heart jump the way it hadn't in years. She stood frozen behind her cabin door, fingers tight around the rifle she'd loaded out of habit more than hope. 5 long years alone had taught her that visitors rarely brought good news. Half her land belonged to the bank now. Her 2 grown sons had gone east and never written. And at 51, she had stopped expecting anything from the world except winter, work, and silence. But when she pulled the door open, the cold air rushed in with something she didn't expect. A tall cowboy stood in the snow, hat crooked, coat patched with careful stitches. In his arms he held a small boy, no older than 8, bundled tight against the wind. The child's cheeks were red from the storm. The man's boots were soaked through. "I'm sorry to trouble you, ma'am," the stranger said, his voice rough but gentle. "My horse went down in the snow. We just need a place to get warm." Catherine stared at him, the rifle lowering as instinct met something softer. In the lamplight she saw the truth behind his tired eyes. He carried the same kind of loneliness she faced each morning in her mirror. The same loss, the same weight. "Come in," she said quietly, stepping aside. Warmth hit them as she shut the door, though the fire was only a faint glow. The boy stirred. "Is this a hotel, Pa?" he whispered. "No, Mickey," the cowboy said softly. "Just a kind lady who saved us from freezing." Catherine ladled what little parsnip soup she had into 2 tin cups, thin but hot. She set them on the table and watched the man settle the sleeping boy on a rug near the fire. "You don't have a wife?" she asked. The cowboy froze for a moment before answering. "No, ma'am. Fever took her 2 years back. Since then, it's just been me and Mickey." Catherine nodded. "Mine passed 7 years ago. Pneumonia. I buried him behind the barn." Silence settled over the room again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It held something shared, something understood. "You live out here alone?" he asked. "I do. My boys are grown. One's in California chasing gold, the other's in St. Paul working the rail yard. Neither writes." Mickey slept soundly, curled under his father's coat. The cowboy leaned against the wall, exhaustion pulling at his face. "You're strong," he said softly. "Living out here on your own." Catherine gave a short laugh. "I'm old and stubborn, that's all." His eyes stayed on her, really on her. "I don't think you're old." She raised a brow. "And how old are you, Mr. Cole?" "James Harrison Cole." 35. She exhaled sharply. "You're a boy." "Ma'am, I haven't been a boy since I was 12. I buried cholera victims in Kansas that year." His gaze lowered. Life makes a man older than the years say. Something in Catherine's chest tugged, an ache she thought had died long ago. "You can sleep here tonight," she said, "but in the morning, you'll need to move on." He nodded, understood. "But if you'll allow it, I could fix that barn door I saw swinging, and the fence posts leaning by the road." "You offering to work for a place to stay?" she asked. "I'm offering to help," he said simply. Catherine studied him carefully. The straightness of his posture, the quiet respect in his voice, the way he looked at her as though she wasn't invisible. 2 days, she said at last. No more. Fair enough. Those 2 days changed everything. By the second evening, the barn door swung strong again, and the fence stood firm against the wind. Mickey followed Catherine around like a shadow, asking questions about chickens and root vegetables, until she found herself smiling more than she had in years. On the morning of the 3rd day, Cole came in from chopping wood, snow glittering in his beard. He set the axe by the door and met her eyes. "I know you told me to leave today," he said quietly. "But the truth is, I don't want to."
Catherine's hand stilled.
"Why? Because you're the first person in a long time who makes this world feel less empty." Her throat tightened. "You're too young for me, Cole. I'm 50, 1 year old." He stepped closer, the firelight catching the quiet certainty in his eyes. "You're not too old for love," he said. "Not to me. You're a woman who's lived, survived, felt loss, kept going. I see strength when I look at you. I see grace. Cole, you don't know me. I know enough. His hand brushed hers, and I'd like to know more. At that moment, Mickey darted in, holding an egg in both palms. "Miss Catherine," he shouted, "the red hen laid one." She smiled at the boy, but her eyes returned to Cole. "Maybe," she said softly, "you two should stay a while longer." The relief in his face was gentle but strong. "We'd like that, ma'am," he said. "We'd like that very much." And for the first time in years, the small cabin felt full again. 3 weeks passed like warm wind through spring grass, each day weaving the three of them closer in ways Catherine hadn't expected. One quiet morning, she stood at the wash basin behind the cabin, sleeves rolled to her elbows, scrubbing Cole's work shirt in cold water. The fabric was rough in her hands, worn soft by years of hard labor. She didn't hear him approach, only felt the shift of the air when he stopped behind her. "Water's still freezing at night," he said. His voice was close, deep enough to send a quick shiver up her spine. She kept her eyes on the shirt, afraid to look at him. "Spring's not here yet." "The way you say my name," he murmured, "tells me spring's closer than you think." Her hands stilled. She hadn't even realized she had whispered his name under her breath. She turned slowly, water dripping from her fingertips. Cole stood closer than propriety allowed, close enough that she could see the tiny gold flecks in his brown eyes, close enough to feel the warmth of him even in the cold morning air. "You've been avoiding me," he said. "I've been working," she replied, though her voice shook. "So have I," Cole said. "Doesn't mean I haven't noticed the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching." Her cheeks warmed. She hated how easily he saw through her. "Don't start trouble you can't finish, Cole Harrison." He stepped closer, backing her gently against the cabin wall. "What are you afraid of?" She swallowed hard. There was no point lying, not to him. "I'm afraid," she whispered, "that you'll wake up one morning and see what I see in the mirror, a tired woman who's forgotten how to be anything but alone." His expression softened. Without looking away, he reached for the dish towel hanging on the line and carefully lifted her hands from the basin. He dried each finger slowly, gently, like she was something precious. "You want to know what I see?" he asked. She couldn't speak, so she nodded. "I see a woman who opened her door to a stranger in a storm. A woman who teaches a lonely boy how to gather eggs with more patience than I've seen in my life. A woman who works from sunup to sundown without complaint." His thumbs brushed her knuckles. "I see strength, Catherine. I see grace. And I see someone who deserves to be touched with kindness." Her breath caught. The space between them felt alive, humming with something she had buried so long she barely recognized it. "Cole," she whispered. "Tell me to stop," he said, voice low. "Tell me I'm wrong, and I'll never speak of this again." But she couldn't. She didn't want to. Instead, she found herself studying the line of his jaw, the scar faint along his temple, the steady rise and fall of his breath. Her hands lifted almost on their own, resting lightly against his chest. "I don't know how to do this anymore," she admitted. "It's been so long since someone—" She hesitated, then said the truth. "Since someone wanted me." Something fierce flashed in Cole's eyes. "Then let me show you." His hand cupped her cheek, and when he kissed her, she felt something inside her come awake. Something warm, fragile, and hungry. Cole's lips were soft but sure, asking permission even as he deepened the kiss. Her hands curled into a shirt, knees weak as a warmth she'd forgotten spread through her. When they finally broke apart, Catherine pressed her forehead against his chest, breath unsteady. "This is madness," she whispered. "Maybe," Cole said, "but it feels more right than anything has in years." Mickey's voice suddenly echoed from inside the cabin, calling for breakfast. Catherine stepped back, smoothing her skirt, trying to breathe evenly. "We go slow," Cole said. "We'll try," she answered, though her heart hammered at the thought of anything slow where he was concerned. Days passed, each one tying them closer. They planted garden beds together, taught Mickey his letters in the evenings, and worked side by side repairing the chicken coop and the pasture fence. Catherine caught Cole watching her sometimes, watching the way her hair came loose from its bun, watching the curve of her smile, watching her with a quiet longing she was terrified to return and terrified not to. One warm spring afternoon, Mickey knelt in the garden and pointed at new sprouts. "They're growing, Miss Catherine." "They are," she said, kneeling beside him. Cole stepped behind them, his shadow falling over both of them as he looked down with a soft smile. For a moment, Catherine wished the three of them could stay like this forever. That night, after Mickey fell asleep near the fire, Catherine sat at the kitchen table mending a torn sleeve. Cole stood across from her, silent for a long time. "Catherine," he said at last, "we need to talk about what's happening here." She kept her eyes on her sewing. "What's happening?" "You know what's happening. This thing between us, it's not going away." Her needle paused. She lifted her gaze to him. Firelight carved shadows along his jaw, making him look both older and younger all at once. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of me? Of wanting something I might not be able to keep." He came to her slowly, then knelt in front of her chair. His hands covered hers. "What if I told you I'm not going anywhere?" he said softly. "What if I told you I've been looking for home my whole life, and I found it here with you?" Her breath trembled. "Catherine," he said, voice steady with certainty, "marry me. Not because it's proper, not because it's expected, but because I love you, because when I look at you, I see the woman I want to grow old beside." Tears filled her eyes. "Cole, I'm 51, and I'm 35, he said. "Let them talk." She searched his face for doubt. There was none. Only truth, only love. "Yes," she whispered. Cole pulled a small wooden ring from his pocket, carved smooth around a river stone. He slipped it onto her finger with shaking hands. "I made it for you," he said. "From the creek we were headed to that night." She brushed a tear away and smiled. "I love it." He kissed her again, slow and deep, a promise wrapped in warmth. They married 3 weeks later beneath the tall cottonwoods on the far edge of the property. No preacher, no guests. Just the three of them standing in soft spring grass while the river whispered nearby. Mickey held a handful of wildflowers he had picked himself, his small face serious with pride. Catherine wore her mother's pearl earrings and a blue calico dress she had sewn for the occasion. Cole had shaved, combed his hair back, and stood straighter than she had ever seen him stand. He looked younger somehow, as if love had softened the hard years that had marked his life. "I promise to see you," Cole said, his voice carrying steady across the clearing, "every day, all of you." "I promise to let you," Catherine replied, tears gathering in her eyes. "And to remember that love doesn't disappear just because we age." When they kissed, Mickey cheered loud enough for the sound to bounce off the cottonwood trunks. It felt like a blessing given by the land itself. Seasons began to turn like pages in a book written by steady hands. Cole tended the fields, rebuilt the root cellar, and cleared brush behind the barn. Catherine mended quilts, planted more vegetables than she ever had before, and kept the home warm with a lightness in her steps that had not lived there for years. Mickey grew tall and strong, reading at the table each night while Catherine corrected his letters, and Cole carved small wooden toys for him to paint. Catherine discovered something she hadn't felt in decades. Peace. Not the quiet, lonely kind she had learned to survive inside. A fuller peace. One built from shared meals, shared chores, and shared warmth when the sun slipped down. Every evening, the three of them walked the pasture fence together, Cole's hand always finding hers. Some nights he lifted her onto the fence rail and kissed her slowly until her heart pounded like she was 20 again. Other nights they simply walked in silence, listening to the wind through the grass and the steady thump of Mickey's boots running ahead. One summer afternoon, Catherine found herself standing in the kitchen, turning the carved ring Cole had made for her. A simple band of wood with a smooth river stone set in its center. She wore it every day. Each time she looked at it, she remembered the storm that brought him to her door, the night the world gave her a second chance. Years passed this way, gentle but rich. Mickey married a banker's daughter with bright eyes. He built his own house on the North Ridge and brought children down every Sunday. The cabin that once held only silence now rang with laughter, small feet barreling across the porch and the smell of Catherine's cornbread warming the air. Cole's hair grew silver at the temples. Catherine's hands grew softer with age, the lines on her face deepening, each one carved by a life fully lived. But his eyes never changed when they looked at her. They always held that same quiet certainty from the morning he first kissed her by the wash basin. One autumn sunset, long after the work of the day was done, Catherine stood on the porch with a shawl over her shoulders. Cole came up behind her, slipping his arms around her waist as the wind rustled through the dry grass. "Cold?" he asked. "Not anymore," she said, leaning back into him. They watched the sky turn gold, then rose, then soft purple. It looked like a painting hung across the horizon. "I'm glad you stayed that night," she whispered. "I didn't stay," he murmured against her hair. "I came home." Her hands trembled slightly as she covered his. Not from fear, not from doubt, from the fullness in her chest that had never faded in all their years together. Love had found her when she thought she was too old. It stayed with her through every season. And every night she lay down beside Cole Harrison, she knew the truth he had once spoken softly in her cabin. She had never been too old for love. She had only been waiting for the right man to knock on her door at sundown.